Hey, brain owners. Welcome to Brain Ownership for Parents, Session 7, Emotional Processing. So, I know I left you guys last time with all that emotional accountability. Hopefully, you've been working with your coach and you've kind of worked through some of the strangeness and some of the frustrations you're going to have around taking accountability for your emotions. So, this one you're going to love. So, today we're going to learn about how to process an emotion, like how you can actually work through those emotions that you have. The next is developing some strategies around those processes. And the last is become comfortable with embracing all emotions. So basically, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. Hope you guys are ready. Let's get started. So, the very first thing that you're going to have to do in order to process an emotion is sit in the emotion or fully feel the emotion. Now, a lot of you are like, holy crap, no way. The key though is that remember, we're emotional beings. We're supposed to feel these things. And trying to shove them under the rug or push them down doesn't serve us. It actually hurts us. When you try to like push away an emotion, that emotion will come back and bring 5 or 6 of its friends. Remember when we talked about the clusters of clusters? The cluster emotions, especially when those fear-based emotions get together, they will assault you. We as humans are sort of wired to not feel pain. We don't want to feel it. So a lot of times we have these great strategies of not feeling pain. A lot of times it leads though to drug abuse and alcohol abuse or doing stupid things. The thing is a lot of times when we talk about the people who have addictions, a lot of times it's because they've had trauma that they've never dealt with and are not comfortable with feeling those emotions. Now, I know some of you are like, holy crap, I totally don't want to do this. I don't want to feel the emotion. But I promise it does hurt at first. But then it gets really kind of interesting. I won't say easy or fun because it's not. But it becomes a very awareness and eye opening process to actually sit in an emotion and feel it and let the body understand how the emotion works and what it feels like. You know, there are people who, especially when we do speaking in public. Now, I love it. I know other people, it makes them nauseous and they'd rather die. But, you know, a lot of times when you have an emotion like anxiety or fear, like your palms will get sweaty or your mouth gets dry, those are all common trauma reactions because it's become such a big deal that your body's actually having this physical emotional reaction to it and it's causing certain aspects of the body to struggle. But it's really interesting once you kind of are able to sit in an emotion and really learn to fully feel it. It's really cool because you become very aware of how you feel, and it's much easier to label and identify, which you've been doing for the last couple of weeks with your coach. It really does help you kind of become aware of how you feel, and it then becomes much easier to manage not only emotion but the reaction to it. So one of the things I want to make sure you know is that you can feel all of these emotions. You're actually wired to feel all the emotions. So let's get to embracing them. So when you're going to sit in and fully feel an emotion, here's how you do it. The first thing you have to do is allow and observe. So you have to let it come. And that's kind of the harder part is you're like, oh God, I don't want to do this. Allow the emotion to kind of sweep over you or crash over you like a wave. I know that when my dad passed away, every time in and around certain aspects of his life, I will get that. I call it the tsunami of grief. I feel like I've been taken over by a wave. Usually happens right around the anniversary of his death. A lot of people are like, oh, doesn't it happen on Father's Day or something else? I'm like, no, it's usually the 1st of February. Right in about that weekend, I start to just feel sad. Um, but I also feel really excited at Thanksgiving because Thanksgiving was actually the last holiday I spent with my dad. And I remember we cooked all day and we laughed and we watched movies. And it was just he and I because my stepmom was at work, but we really liked it. We had a great time. And so at Thanksgiving, I always have happy memories of my dad. Now, it does make me a little sad. I feel sad remembering that, but it's more like a happy sadness. And we'll talk about we've talked about it before, but we'll talk about that too. So the first thing to do is to fully allow the emotion. Just allow it. A lot of times I say find a place to do. So a lot of times when I need to grieve, I'll schedule grief. I've had a lot of loss in my life, and so there are days and times where I'll start to feel that tickle in the back of my throat, like I know I'm gonna have to cry. So what I do is I'll schedule grief. And I know it sounds a little weird, but basically what I do is I'll find a place in my home, and I'll grab a picture of the person or something, and then I'll let myself feel it, like fully feel it. I'll cry. Sometimes even now, like I get teary, I think about it, but I just let the emotion in. And that is one of the best ways to kind of process and allow your body to feel the emotion. So allow it and then feel it fully. Don't try to hold back. Don't and wipe your tears. Just feel it. Feel the emotion fully, especially if you're in a quiet space, where you can actually feel the emotion and allow it to come. The next thing is don't judge yourself. First thing we all do is we start, oh, I shouldn't feel this way. My life is pretty good. We start talking to ourselves like, I shouldn't be sad because, I don't have it as bad as like an orphan in Somalia. Don't judge yourself. Again, remember, we're humans. We have emotions. We are emotional beings. It's what drives all of our actions. So don't judge yourself for the feelings that you're having. Just allow them to come. And the last piece of the allow and observe is be uncomfortable. Really get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because it's always going to kind of suck. To allow all that in, especially the fear-based. But here's the thing. So many of us have trouble allowing love-based emotions too. If you think about it, when life is going really well, we all of a sudden are all like, oh wait, life is going really good. Something's going to happen. Brene Brown calls it foreboding joy. We all of a sudden, like when life is going really well, all of a sudden we're like, something's going to happen. But allow yourself to just be happy. Allow yourself to be in love. Allow yourself to feel courage. Allow yourself to feel accomplishment when you've had something to accomplish. I know I've told this story before, but I had two sisters that I learned as children not to get really excited about anything and not to get too sad about anything. And one of them came into my office and she passed the AP Chem exam with a 5. Jeez, if I got an AP Chem, if I got a 5 in the AP Chem exam, I would have like hired a skywriter. Because I would have been so excited. But she was like, oh yeah, I got a 5 on the AP Chem exam. I'm like, okay. Really? You should be way more excited about that. But so allow yourself to feel those emotions, happy, sad, whatever. Just allow it to come. Next thing is we're going to validate the emotion. So fully feel it. You're doing it. Next thing I want you to do is say, okay, I accept I feel this way. It kind of goes back to that first awareness piece that you did, and then you took responsibility this last week with your coach. Accept the emotion. Accept that that's how you feel. I feel angry. I feel happy. I feel accomplished. I always feel accomplished when we get these things done. These sessions that we film at the end, I'm always like, yep, I did that pretty well. So remember, allow and accept the emotion. Just allow it and be like, yeah, that's how I feel. The next one is to don't judge the emotion. Not only do we judge ourselves for feeling, but then we're like, oh, I shouldn't feel that way. I shouldn't feel that way, right? But then we're like, I shouldn't feel bad. Like, this isn't a good emotion. Remember, there's no good or bad emotions. They just are emotions. Don't judge the emotion. Don't say, I shouldn't feel angry. I shouldn't feel irritated. I shouldn't feel frustrated. I shouldn't be this happy. I shouldn't feel this accomplished. It's actually one of my biggest pet peeves. And when people don't like own how amazing they are, and they're like, oh, I don't want to be egotistical. Being egotistical comes from a very different place of feeling accomplished and like a total badass. We are all great at a lot of things. And so when you found the thing that you're really good at, you just better own that, because that's what you should own. And that's how you should feel about it. If you're really good at something, own it. And be like, yeah, I'm really good at that. Doesn't mean that you're egotistical. It just means that you know that you're good at that. Own what you're good at. Ego comes from not being good at it and sort of being an imposter in it. All right. So the next thing is you're not judging your emotion. The next thing is to be honest about the trigger. Remember I talked about all those triggers? You need to be honest with why you're being triggered. What is it that's triggering this emotion? You know, could be that your 5-year-old was trying to bring you the milk and spilled the milk, and now you're angry and frustrated and irritated. Was it the 5-year-old bringing you the milk? I mean, he or she was trying to do a nice thing, and then all of a sudden you're angry, frustrated, irritated. Well, it's not that you're angry, frustrated, and irritated with him or her trying to bring you the milk. Was it the coworker that day, or was it the ride home that really, really got you? What was it? So be honest about your trigger. The last piece of the validation of the emotion is problem solve the trigger. Don't problem solve the emotion, problem solve the trigger. Why does that bother you? Or why does that actually make you really happy? Problem solve the trigger. Look for the trigger. Like, how can I not allow that to happen? Or how can I choose to not feel that way? But look at the trigger. Look what it's doing and how it's affecting you. And then, can I not deal with this person? Can I prepare better? One of the things that I know I really struggle with is having so much to do and not feeling like I'm accomplished at the end of the day. And so then I kind of get a little down on myself. So part of what I learned to do is like not only write down like all the things I have to do that day, but then at the end of the day, I look at all the things I did do that day. I try to kind of keep the list of the stuff I didn't get to out of the way, but I focus on what I did do and how I did feel better and how I got all this stuff done. So be honest about your trigger and then problem solve the trigger, not the emotion. Remember, the emotions are absolutely fine. All right, the last piece is to focus on you. Think about how you physically feel when you're feeling that emotion. Like I said, if you get anxious speaking in public, your palms get sweaty. Do you get like sweaty armpits? Do you get flushed in the face? What is it? Think about what the physical feelings of the emotion are, because they're there. We just a lot of times try to ignore them or we try to push them down. A lot of times, and there's a lot of research out with, especially teenagers, having a lot of gastrointestinal issues, a lot of stomach problems. And what they're finding is just anxiety because they can't talk about it, they can't express it. And so our body finds ways to deal with all of that extra energy and all that extra emotional energy. And so it can cause problems in the body. It's also why all of us are so stressed all the time. It's why we have a lot of these stress related health issues. The next piece is, can you change the situation? This comes back to that focusing on problem solving the trigger. Can you change the situation? Is there someone in your life or a coworker that you really get frustrated with or that really like pushes your buttons? Can you change the situation? Can you not talk to that person? Or is there something that you can do to change the situation? The next piece is, do you have ownership of the situation and the emotion? Have you owned the emotion? Have you done the pieces? And then do you have ownership of the situation? Can you do things like change it? Or is this something what piece have you contributed to this situation? Next, breathe, people, breathe. I know it's one of those things that when you're like upset, anxious, whatever, people are like, oh, just take a deep breath. Yeah, that's a biological response. When you take a deep breath, you force air into your lungs, which then forces air into the blood, which then forces air, by the way, up here, forces oxygen up into the brain, allows you to think. It allows your amygdala to stop freaking out, and then bring the prefrontal cortex online, which is the sort of the key to all of this. The last thing is to decide to hold on or let it go. One of the biggest things that I run into with working with you guys is that you hold on to it forever. We do. We hold on to things so long. I know tons and tons of people, divorced couples, teenagers, like one thing happened 10 years ago and they'd never let it go. Okay, that's really hard on your mental state. It's really hard on your mental health, and it's really hard on your physical body. I'm not saying that you need to let stuff go, but you need to actively decide to keep it or let it go. If you need to keep it, to keep processing through it, hold on to it. I'm not kidding. If you need to continue to process through it and hold on to it, do it. Hold on to it, but then actively process it. Actively work through it every time, because you need to learn. At some point in time, you're having to be like, let it go. So I'll tell you guys a quick story. Something happened to me a couple of years ago, out of town with some friends at an event, and the event ripped okay, but the end, it ended very, very badly. And this woman that I know was really rude and mean to all of us, everybody that was there to sort of support her. And I showed up the next morning at her house, and I was like, hey, just wanted to give you an opportunity to apologize for the stuff you said to all of us last night. And she basically told me to F off. And to this day, I'm not friends with her. And people are like, well, but you should forgive and forget. I forgive and I've let it go. I just won't let her back into my life, because I know that allowing her back in my life allows me, or sort of opens that door for her to do those things, and for me to kind of opt in to feel that way again. And I don't want to feel that way. But I've totally let it go. And that's where it comes from. Like, when I see her, I'm not angry with her. I'll be very cordial to her. I just don't engage. And I'm certainly not going to allow her back in my life as a trusted friend. So that's what I'm talking about. Sometimes you have to work through it. And it took me a while. It took me several months to kind of work through what she had said and how it impacted me and how I felt about it. And I couldn't be in the same room with her. I couldn't be around her for a long time, just because it would bring up all of those memories and all of those emotions for me. But the thing is I spent a lot of time processing through it. I spent a lot of time doing the stuff I just told you to do. And then it comes to the point where you're like, you know what? I'm going to let it go. And I feel so much better now. Again, it's not like a process once and let it go. That's not what happens. Especially big ones like breakups, ends of marriages, or deaths of family member. Like I said, I still process the death of my dad all the time. And I'll probably never just let it go. It just becomes part of who I am. And when I get sad, I know that I have to honor those feelings. So you can decide to let it go, or you can decide to hold on. And it's okay to hold on to it. Just understand why you're holding on to it. Is it because you need to process, or because you need some sort of validation to feel angry or frustrated about something? Hope that makes sense. All right. What you need to know about processing these silly emotions, right? There is no one way to feel about something. Like I said last week, we all will come in and actually feel and experience things differently. So there's no one good way. You may love Thanksgiving. I love Thanksgiving, but I have friends who hate Thanksgiving because it reminds them of all the craziness that happened in their childhood. Or maybe you love Christmas. Maybe you don't like Christmas. There's never one way to feel about a situation. And we all experience things differently. So embrace the way you feel about a situation. Remember, there's no good or bad emotions. They're just emotions. They're fear or love, and that's all that's going on there. Fear-based emotions are also not destructive. They can actually be very adaptive and can save your life. I mean, if you're walking out in the mountains or out on a hike and you come across a puma, you're going to want fear to take over. Pretty sure, because fear causes the body to respond very differently than like, oh, hey, kitty. So fear is not destructive. Fear is not destructive. None of the fear-based emotions are destructive. The sadness, and I always tell people the reason we are so sad is because we loved so much. And that's awesome. You have full control of your emotions and your response. Remember, those first 90 seconds are the ones that suck. But after that, you choose to feel that way. And like everything else, emotional ownership is more about you being authentic and being you. So remember, your emotions are yours and you can own them. All right. Last sort of piece is your response is your responsibility. Again, I don't know how to sort of hammer this home, but the way you respond to an emotion is what most of us struggle with. And your response is your responsibility. it's not the emotion that really bothers all of us. It's the way that we respond to the emotion. The way I like to talk about this one is the angry criers. I know you guys are out there. I have a couple. Sometimes I am too. We get so angry that we cry, and then people are like, "Oh, honey, are you okay? Are you sad?" No, I'm not sad. I'm trying really hard not to punch you in the face. That's, we cry, and basically crying is just energy trying to escape the body. It's like, get me out of here. And so your response is your responsibility, the way that you respond. So if you're angry, what do you do? Do you hit somebody? Do you stomp your feet? Do you slam doors? Do you sigh? I know a couple of men that I've worked with that the sighing drives them nuts. Their wife will go, which, oh, by the way, is exactly what their mom used to do when she was irritated with their dad. And those triggers are big and deep, as we've talked about. So what is your response? Stop and think about what is your response when you feel a certain way. And do you like it, or do you want to change it? And that's where the power of emotional responsibility and emotional ownership actually comes in. So your response is your responsibility. Let me give you some tips on how to control the response. Like I said, you're controlling the response, not the emotion. Those first 90 seconds are critical. Here's a couple of ways for you to be able to control your response to the emotion. Breathe slowly. Like I said before, breathe, people, breathe. We spend most of our time breathing from like mid-sternum up. By the way, our lungs are most of our chest. So take a deep breath. Acknowledge that storyteller I talked about, but basically tell it to beat feet and get lost. You can control the story you tell in your head. Now, here's a couple of really good ones, especially for little kids. And then it goes for adults too. Count backwards from 10 in a different language. Most of us can do 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's not doing anything in your brain. That's still allowing the amygdala to fire and to tell the the hypothalamus to keep firing, right? What I really want you to do is actually count backwards in a different language. When we count backwards in a different language, the amygdala, remember that amygdala? We talked about it the first time. We talked about it in emotions too. It fires and it tells the hypothalamus to fire all the emotional stuff, right? It's what gets a bad rap in the fight or flight response. Well, we want it to really do that when it needs to. But when you count backwards in a different language, what you do is you engage your PFC, your prefrontal cortex. It's the thinking brain. The amygdala and the PFC cannot function at the same time. It's this front piece or this back middle piece, And when this front piece is engaged, the emotional response slows down and we can actually think. Remember, critical thinking's all up here. So engage your PFC brain. Now, I have a challenge for you parents. And then I challenge you to challenge your kids. If you can't count backwards in a different language, say the alphabet backwards in English. Most of you all of a sudden are like, Z, Y, X. It's pretty normal. Most of us are like, I can do forward, but backwards? Holy crap, that's hard. I actually have learned and taught myself to do it, but sometimes I have to slow down and be like, Z, Y, X, W, U, B. So that's the thing. Slow down. We do, because what'll happen is you'll have to think forward and then backwards. So you'll have to come forward. Like we know certain spots like MNOP, we know we can go forward, but then we have to stop and go backwards. So when you do that, you engage that prefrontal cortex and it actually turns the amygdala on sort of a low burner and it's not allowed to react as fast. The other thing, and I get a lot of flack for this, but walk away. If your response is going to be inappropriate, walk away. Or if you think you're going to start to get mean or nasty, which so many of us do with our partners and our kids, walk away. It's helpful to say, hey, I'm getting really emotional. I need to walk away right now. And then just walk away. I've done it. It's actually kind of what my parents used to do. And the last piece is to take ownership of that emotion. It's your emotion. Feel it fully, but take responsibility for the way that we react to it. All right. Last piece, those parenting applications. Learn to fully feel emotions. It helps increase your mental health. And teach your children that it's okay to feel that way. You don't have to shift them, like I talked about last time. Don't constantly try to shift them to feel good. Let them sit in the emotions so they know that it's okay to feel those things. Allow emotional energy to process. You have to allow your emotional energy to process through the body. And then teach your kids how to process their emotions too. Interesting enough, children can learn to manage their emotional response, sometimes better than you. Hope this was super helpful. I hope you guys really look forward to session 8. We're going to talk specifically about a couple of different emotions that actually have significant physical impacts in the body. And otherwise, make sure that you reach out to your coach and schedule your session. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Have a good one.